So Figma is actually, it's a web app. But you can run it in a standalone window on your computer or in your browser, and that's one thing that makes Figma really unique. It's built from the ground up to be shared. It's multi-user. You can invite colleagues into your project, and you can draw and collaborate in real time. When I create a new document in Figma, I can either create a design file or a FigJam file. FigJam is a new thing. They're competing with Miro and similar tools. My guess is this product will be dead in 6 months because it's not as good as Miro, and they should be focusing on their design tool.
Yeah, so that's collaboration and mind mapping rather than direct design.
Yeah, I understand the sort of business rationale for doing it, but others are doing it better than Figma is doing. So. So here, when you start, you have just a gray canvas. It's infinite. So I can take a box here and draw something. And I can, with my scroll wheel and command button, I can zoom in and out and pan around. You don't have a fixed canvas like you would have in Photoshop, for instance. And just to give a little history on like UI design tools. So if you were designing like user interfaces, you probably started way back in the past with Photoshop, and at some point you switched to Sketch, and that was like a revolution for screen designers. Suddenly you were more sort of working with. I mean, Photoshop is for photos, right? So in Sketch you were designing with vectors like rectangles and circles and so on, which gave you so much more precision and ability to scale things and so on. And then sort of Figma is the next generation after Sketch, and now Sketch is playing catch up, and very few people are still using Photoshop for UI design. But up here you have your creation tools. You have the selection arrow. You have this menu with basic, we call it simple shapes like rectangles, lines, arrows, ellipse or a circle. You have the polygon, star, and so on. Images you can just drag and drop. You can also like drag and then place them, but you can also always like drag and drop photo in. Like so. And there's a couple of special elements in Figma that are quite important. One is called frame. And if you're doing a design for an iPhone, for instance, you would typically have at least one frame that's the screen of the device. And when I create a new frame, here on the right side, I have predefined frame sizes that for different like phones and desktops and so on. So frames are kind of like a group in another drawing tool, but it also has a surface in itself. So it can have like a border and a background color and so on. But they will be quite important as you use Figma. So frames can also contain other objects. So I can move this inside, and now it sort of exists inside of the frame here. And by the way, if you have any questions, just interrupt, and we'll address them right on.
So objects automatically snap inside the frame. So like
yes, you mean when I drag it over, it turns blue like this. You see it sort of now. If I drop it, it will drop inside the frame.
Okay.
But I can also pull it out of the frame. And on the left side here, you have the hierarchy of your project. So you see sort of that the rectangle goes inside and outside of the frame.
And Tom, I saw you increase the size without losing the scale. Are you doing that like with the mouse wheel, or?
Yeah, so I can, with the command button, I guess control on a PC and the scroll wheel, I can just zoom in and out.
Yep.
And I mean, you can have really big canvases, and you can zoom into a lot of detail here.
You get a lot of detail.
Yeah.
Nice.
I'll send you the link here for the file that I'm in. See if you can open that up. I'm going to give you edit access to, so you can draw. So now you have so Figma has frames, but it also has normal groups. And the difference between a group and a frame is that a group does not have, a group is only defined by its children. So if I select these two and group them together, I can also use the right mouse button and group them. So now they are, I can move them as one, and I can double click on one and then get access to the child object here. But if I, the sort of the size of this group is defined by the children inside. So if I move this outside here, now the group is this big. Whereas the frame has more its own surface that you can define. Then on the right side, you have all the formatting. I mean, this is typically the way almost all design programs work right now. So here's all the formatting things. So you have fonts, colors. And for almost all these styles, you can define predefined styles that you can reuse over and over again. So for instance, this text, if I think that's headline, I can then click on the little dots here, that is style, and then the plus button, and define a new style called headline. If I click on the canvas and I have nothing selected, I can see the styles that I've defined in this document. So here I see I have a text style called headline. So if I create a new text, now it's a bit silly. I'll start over here so you get the point. So if I new text object and then I select headline, it will get the same font size and font weight and all that. So you can easily create sort of style sheets or templates for all the styles. And the same goes for colors and shadows and so on. So for instance, if I find a nice blue color here, and I want to make sure I use the same color everywhere, I can call it blue. But I can also, if I have multiple blue colors that I want to reuse, I can add a slash. So I call it blue/medium. Oh, sorry, the plus button. Blue/medium. Now I can also have like, maybe I want a light blue color. So I can take this one and I just brighten it up a bit. And I call this blue/light. So now when I select the color, it's grouped by, first I have blue, and then I have two different variants of blue, which you can create sort of a hierarchy of colors. So the slash character has a special function there. typically you want to export your artwork. You don't have the sort of save. You don't save it here, but you use export to export the graphics that you want. And for every object, you can define. You have an export tab at the bottom. So if I select this frame here, I rename it to my mobile screen. And then click export. I can define here. I want it exported as a PNG image. 1x means that it will have the same resolution as defined up here. But if I want double resolution for maybe like iPhones have like a Retina screen, which is 2 times or 3 times the actual pixels. You can define that. I can also have multiple formats here, so I can have an SVG if I want a vector image as an output, or a PDF. And then when I click export here, it saves 3 files actually to my computer. So one thing, the coolest feature in Figma is something called components, and this is the most clear connection between how a developer would build something and a designer. And this is I haven't seen this concept in any other drawing tool so far. But basically, I can select objects on screen, and I can create a component. And now it gets this little 4, like a clover kind of icon. And I can rename this component as a header. And now if I copy paste this header, I get a second one, and it looks a bit different. You can see that it's not 4 clover, it's just like a rhombus or something. And if I keep copying this, all the copies have this style, whereas the original has the 4 dots here. So I have like a master, I have a main, the root component, and then I have copies or instances of it. And this means that I can now, if I change the color here, I change it everywhere in all the children. And I can change the text and all that. And I can like restyle things afterwards. But it's actually more impressive than that, because you can have overrides on specific copies. Like if I want this one to be purple, I can copy that. I can't move things around here. It's locked like that, but I can change the text. I can change the colors and modify some aspects of this header.
You can't move. You can't move around what?
I can't move around the text inside. But let's say I make a copy of this. Now it's an instance, a copy of the header. I want to redraw it, so I can I will detach it. Now it's like a pure frame, like if I just draw a frame on the screen. I want to make like a dialog window. So I change this a little bit. 1 second. I'm going to modify here how I want this child object to move as the dialog changes shape. So I make sure it's centered and at the top. I'll rename this object to dialog window. And I can do like that. Maybe add some rounded corners to it. And drop shadow. and change this color a little bit. Okay, so now I have this dialog here. I'm turning it into a component. Oops, that's not what I wanted. No, I want to rescale this one. So now I have a dialog that I can sort of reshape any way I want. And the text sort of adapts to that. So it's a very, very, very flexible system. And for instance, if you would implement, I'll go to extraforwork.com here and share the tab. So if I would go and redraw this screen, for instance, in Figma, I would definitely turn every of these buttons like would be the same component. And you can also make, in Figma, you can make buttons and other components that where the size of the button changes with the amount of text. And of course, all these boxes would be the same component that I reuse over and over again. The challenge that I can't really overcome in Figma is that I can't replace the image. So to achieve this, I would basically have all the images in Figma in the component, but only hiding and showing one layer at a time. Yeah. But it's a great system that really makes it fast to create user interfaces and so on.
Are you able to build in triggers so that as you build a drawing, like, and you put a button that's supposed to be interactive, that you're able to put up the dialog box after the button is clicked and kind of get a...
Yes, you can do that. Figma has a panel here that's called prototype. And basically allows you to, there's new features there. From here, when I switch to the prototype tab, I get these kind of functions. So I can, the most easiest way of doing this is basically you make copies of the same screen.
Mm-hmm.
So you have, this is like with the dialog open.
Mm-hmm.
And from this, I would just link to this screen. So now you have a button that opens this dialog. And there's a lot of more advanced things you can do with it. But that's the basic use case. You can create, if you have like all your screens on the canvas, and then I can sort of just link between them like this.
That's it. Now, what was that mode you just went into?
Prototype. So I have design, prototype, and inspect.
And the screen image on prototype is where you actually can simulate using the intended screen, the iPhone view, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I mean, I can, when I have nothing selected here, I can select what kind of device I want to show it in, and it's of course easier if this resolution matches the size of my frame here, but I think it will try to do its best if I change to like an iPad mini, for instance. We'll see what happens. So my frame is too small, but so it just shows it in top corner.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yes.
Neat.
And
So
so in other projects that we have, like we have gigantic flow charts like this with all the screens, all the states of an app, and you can go flow between every screen.
So this is how we need the whole XR4 work flow to be charted.
Yeah.
And have you worked in Figma with the XR4 work chart until now, or?
Yeah. So all the design I've done let's see, where have it, and all the like Matt's design was done here as well, and the intern that you had for a while, her work is here too. So here's some UX stuff. I have here's where the visual design. And here you can see here I'm using. So I have one component for the grid here that I'm reusing over again. And I'll show you another feature that's quite powerful in Figma. That's also one thing that makes it much more also sort of bridges the gap between developers and designers. And it's this one. It's called auto layout. So normally in a drawing program, you have to move things around and make sure you have everything is aligned and so on. Sketch actually introduced the functionality where you can select multiple things like this. I think if one is a little bit out of not aligned, you can just press the align button. Oops, it only aligned like that. But then Sketch added the functionality, so it gave everything handles, so you can start moving things around like this, and it keeps all the distances intact, but just changes the order. Or if you want different distance, you can just drag in the handle in between and do that. So that Sketch already had that, but then Figma took it one step further, and they added auto layouts. So if you click right mouse button and then select add auto layout, it puts all the objects that you've selected inside a new frame. So it creates a new frame and puts them inside. And it also enables this auto layout here. And now I can sort of move things around. I can't move it. If I drag it out, I can drag it out of the entire frame. But as long as it stays in the frame, all the positions are forced here. And then I can sort of, on the frame level, I can decide like how much space do I want between, maybe nothing. Do I want it to flow this way or that way? So you can have either a column or a row. And you can have also space around if you want. So this is very useful. And you can see I use that in the, oops, here comes the cat. Thank you. One limitation with auto layout is that it can't create a grid. So you have to make a grid, you have to make like first rows and then have sort of columns inside rows. But if you do that, it's quite powerful. So now here inside I can like should go meet in VR. And now I can move things around. And it keeps them intact. Yeah. Any other questions that you might have?
how involved do you see us all being in this tool?
I think it's great if we could have, if we could use Figma as both our UX tool and our UI design tool. We can do UX things with just like gray blocks and so on. Like you can sketch out a landing page like this, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can, when we have like a proper art director or a UI designer, they can work directly in Figma as well. One cool thing that comes from the component system is that you can start blocking out the site like this and making sure that you use the component system. And then as the second sort of step, when the designer comes in, they can start like adding visual fidelity to the design, and sort of keeping the same structure that you already have. So it's an easy sort of path from a UX wireframe sketch to more final design work.
Mm-hmm.
Tom, are you able to export this work? I mean, if you've got some sort of final design in, are you able to export it and more easily use that in your design of a page somehow?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways to do that. I can select an object here and copy CSS code, which is like styling design code. There are a couple of plugins that export work from Figma. I made one myself called FigMachine, which basically takes a Figma document or Figma frame and exports that as React code, because React is what we're developing the front end in. So I can sort of paste a Figma file here, and then select a frame that I want to export it, and then it creates the code here that I can use.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Because that would be one of the benefits, right? Is that it's going to save you time. It's great to have the ability to do the design, but then if you just have to recode it all later.
Yes.
So yeah, this is nice.
This is a great way of at least scaffolding a view, but usually there's other requirements or like a workflow or something like that that has other implications on how you want to code the page anyway. So it doesn't take you all the way probably, but it could be like a starting point.
Mm-hmm.
So if I take my the file that we just worked on here, copy that and into FigMachine. So mobile screen, generate React code, see what it spits out. Yeah, it's just very simple. It's just a couple of headers, and then the headers defined further down here, how it looks like.
Huh. Very handy.
Mm-hmm. And of course, it's Figma is multi-user. So you can do like live brainstorms and things like that. You can see in the Figma UI, you have different like little icons representing us being in the Figma file up here. And if I click on R for Rick here, I can see what Rick is looking at. So if you want to showcase something, I can sort of follow you around.
So as I'm moving this, you're seeing it because like I see your mouse coming up real time.
Yep. And I see what you're moving and looking at.
Yep.
This one.
Yep.
And I can switch to Nicholas and see what Nicholas is looking at. And you can leave comments up here on the toolbar. You have a comment system, so you can place a comment like, "Hey, Rick, okay, Nicholas, can you take look at this?" And post that, and you get it works very similar to like Google Docs. You get like a list of all the comments that have been made. You can move these arrows around, and I think you can like resolve when something is done. You can resolve a task, and it's like goes away from the list.
Oh, so in some ways it's like a task list.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool.
There's also a big community. One thing of like this being like thought designed with the internet and the web from the start is they have like a community of plugins and templates and stuff like that. So if I want to like landing page templates, there's plenty of templates I can just pick from. And reuse. Some of I think all of this is free currently. I think they don't have a pricing model built in. Some of the plugins have like that you need a paid subscription elsewhere, but Figma doesn't have a payment system, so all this stuff is free.
Nice.
Yeah.